Jasmine Crockett entered the conversation with a presence that immediately shifted the energy in the room. Her demeanor was composed, but there was a fire behind her words, an unmistakable sense that she came prepared not just to participate, but to deliver a reckoning. From the moment she took the floor, it was clear she wasn't interested in playing political theater or indulging the usual back-and-forth noise. She had a message, and she was going to deliver it with precision, clarity, and unshakable resolve. There was a palpable contrast between her and the usual dramatics that often dominate televised political exchanges. While others posture and project outrage for the sake of spectacle, Jasmine brought something different: substance. She spoke with intention, every word anchored in facts, yet sharpened with passion. She didn't raise her voice, but she didn't need to. Her control over the room came not from volume, but from the weight of her truth. You could see it in the body language of everyone around her. People weren't just listening. They were locked in. What made the moment even more impactful was how she walked the fine line between confidence and respect. She didn't interrupt. She didn't resort to cheap shots. But she also didn't flinch when confronted. Her strength wasn't just in what she said, but how she said it. Direct, firm, and unapologetically honest. She leaned into the facts with unwavering certainty, unbothered by the noise swirling around her. The typical deflection tactics couldn't touch her because she never gave them room to breathe. It was a masterclass in controlling the narrative. She spoke to the core issues with surgical accuracy, and her clarity cut through the fluff like a blade. There were no distractions in her delivery, no false equivalencies, no attempts to soften the blow, just a steady hand pulling back the curtain on years of political whitewashing, media manipulation, and selective outrage. She framed her points with undeniable logic, drawing a straight line between what is seen and what is often conveniently ignored. What elevated the moment was how she used rhetorical strategy, not for flash, but for impact. She asked pointed questions that didn't need answers. They were answers in themselves. Her pauses weren't gaps. They were punctuation, letting the weight of her words settle in. She wasn't just speaking to the person across from her. She was speaking to every viewer who's ever felt gaslit by the endless spin cycles of modern politics, and she did it without name-calling or theatrics, just the truth, spoken plainly and with conviction. Even more impressive was her ability to maintain her composure while delivering a blistering critique. That kind of control under pressure isn't just a skill, it's power. Power that comes from knowing you're right, from doing your homework, from living in the reality that so many try to bury under distraction and denial. You could sense that she wasn't just speaking from a political stance, but from lived experience, from a place of deep awareness of how narratives are weaponized and who pays the price. The reactions in real time told the story just as much as her words. There were stumbles, hesitations, and visible discomfort from those unprepared to face such a direct confrontation with uncomfortable truths. She didn't just hold her ground, she claimed it. And in doing so, she flipped the dynamics of the conversation entirely. What started as an attempt to corner her turned into a spotlight moment, not because she shouted over anyone, but because she rose above everything they threw her way. This wasn't a soundbite. This was a shift. The kind of shift that doesn't just happen during one conversation, but lingers, because it exposed not only the contradictions in the arguments against her, but the fragility of those making them. She illuminated how easy it is to rattle those who rely on half-truths and slogans, and how devastating it can be when those tools are met with someone who knows better and refuses to play along. In that moment, she wasn't just participating in a debate. She was embodying what accountability looks like. She wasn't there to perform. She was there to remind people of the truth, and she did it so powerfully that even silence became a kind of applause. Karoline Leavitt entered the segment with the confidence of someone who believed she had control of the narrative. Her usual tone was assertive, and her posture gave the impression that she had rehearsed her points and anticipated the direction the conversation would take. There was an air of certainty in her opening remarks, the kind that often comes from feeling backed by a familiar playbook, one that's been relied on time and time again in political discourse. But what unfolded in the moments that followed made it abundantly clear that she had not anticipated the caliber of response she would be met with. When the counterpoint arrived, it was swift, unapologetic, and incredibly pointed. The facts presented weren't abstract or open to interpretation, they were direct and grounded in a reality that could not be spun or diluted. The shift in Karoline's expression was subtle at first, a quick blink, a shift in posture, but it became more pronounced with each passing sentence. As the foundation of her argument began to crack under the weight of well-articulated truth, her body language began to betray her. She attempted to interject, at first lightly, almost reflexively, as if trying to redirect the flow back to safer ground. But it didn't land. There was no room for diversion, no pause that allowed for recovery. The pace and force of the rebuttal came not from volume, but from undeniable clarity. Each point was a blow to the scaffolding of her talking points, and slowly it became evident that she was not just on the defensive, she was unraveling. There's a particular kind of silence that speaks louder than words, and it filled the space around her. Not because she had run out of time to speak, but because she had run out of viable responses. The usual fallback tactics, changing the subject, invoking whataboutism, feigning outrage, were rendered useless in the face of such unyielding confrontation with reality. She wasn't interrupted, she wasn't shouted over. Yet she stood there with nothing to say, visibly caught between disbelief and embarrassment. For someone who often thrives in partisan environments where echo chambers reinforce one another, being placed in a setting where accountability reigns supreme can be jarring. That was exactly what happened. She wasn't just met with disagreement, she was met with someone who refused to let distortion pass unchecked. Someone who challenged her not with insults, but with irrefutable evidence, context, and history. That kind of engagement isn't something you can sidestep with a talking point. It requires preparation, depth, and an ability to reckon with facts, none of which were in her toolkit that day. The audience saw it. The viewers could feel it. That moment where the bravado dissolved and what was left was a silence filled with exposure. She wasn't prepared for a confrontation grounded in such unapologetic clarity. She didn't know how to respond because, deep down, she likely understood that any response would only dig her deeper. And so she stood there, the silence growing heavier, the cameras still rolling, her opponent undeterred and unwavering. It wasn't just a rhetorical defeat. It was a collapse of the illusion of control. She had come armed with lines designed to provoke, distract, and dominate the conversation. But none of that could withstand the force of someone speaking truth without fear. This wasn't a moment she could spin into a win with a clever tweet or a post-interview soundbite. This was live, unfiltered, and unmistakably real. There was no dramatic exit, no heated back and forth, just the quiet implosion of someone who thought she was ready and found out in real time that she wasn't. She had nowhere to go, nowhere to retreat. Every attempted rebuttal withered before it could take shape, not because she wasn't trying, but because there was no ground left to stand on. She had been methodically dismantled, not through aggression but through truth, and that kind of defeat doesn't require volume to echo, it reverberates on its own. The stunned silence that overtook her wasn't just a reaction, it was a revelation. One that showed how quickly confidence can dissolve when it's not rooted in truth, and how powerful it is when someone refuses to let lies or misdirection define the conversation. What made it all the more powerful was that it happened not behind closed doors or in carefully edited clips. It unfolded live in front of everyone, leaving no doubt. Live television has a way of amplifying truth in a manner that no pre-recorded segment or press release ever could. There's no buffer, no second take, no editing room to clean up the mess or soften the blow. When Jasmine Crockett began speaking, the atmosphere shifted, not because of theatrics, but because she brought something that is often sorely missing from these moments: unfiltered, unwavering truth. Her delivery wasn't laced with hesitation or wrapped in political pleasantries. It was raw, honest, and rooted in a deep sense of purpose. From the start, it was clear she had no intention of dancing around the issues or offering half measures. She approached the discussion with precision, focusing on facts that had been conveniently ignored or deliberately twisted in the public conversation. There was a rhythm to her words, not rehearsed, but natural, as though she had carried these truths for a long time and was finally laying them bare. Her voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. Not anger, but resolve. Not outrage, but accountability. As she spoke, the usual techniques that often disrupt or derail a meaningful exchange, interruptions, deflections, false equivalencies, fell flat. She didn't allow them to redirect the narrative. Instead, she held firm, pushing forward with each point, layering her message with the kind of clarity that doesn't just inform, it stuns. There was no room for misinterpretation. Every sentence hit like a pulse, steady and sharp, each building on the last. Her control over the moment was undeniable, not because she dominated with volume, but because her words carried the weight of undeniable reality. What truly set her apart was the courage to confront the deeper implications of the hypocrisy she exposed. She didn't simply point out inconsistencies, she traced them to their source. She illustrated how perception is weaponized, how scandals are selectively moralized, and how the media's coverage often reflects a double standard that serves power more than it challenges it. These weren't abstract critiques. She anchored them in real-world examples, delivered with such confidence and composure that it left little room for rebuttal. The live format made her words even more powerful. The absence of a safety net meant that every moment had to stand on its own. And it did. Her facts were sourced, her logic tight, and her tone unwavering. What might have been dismissed in a tweet or downplayed in a soundbite was suddenly undeniable, when spoken clearly, directly, and in real time. The platform didn't diminish her message, it elevated it. It gave her the space to speak freely and fully, and she seized it with the kind of authority that only someone deeply grounded in truth can wield. The reaction around her told its own story. Those who had come prepared to challenge her suddenly looked unsure. What had been assumed to be a routine clash of opinions quickly became a moment of reckoning. No one expected the conversation to take the turn it did. But once she began speaking, the shift was unmistakable. The energy in the room changed, the usual back and forth froze, and suddenly, she was the only one who appeared completely composed. Her refusal to back down wasn't aggressive. It was principled. She didn't need to attack. She didn't rely on volume or sensationalism. She let the facts speak, and when the facts were uncomfortable, she didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned in. She dared to say what others tiptoe around. She made it clear that there is a difference between disagreement and dishonesty, between spin and reality, and she made sure the audience understood exactly which one she was confronting. Moments like this are rare, not because they can't happen, but because few are willing to speak this directly. Fewer still do it with such composure, refusing to let the noise overpower the message. But that day, she did exactly that. And the fact that it happened live, where the audience could see every reaction, every shift in tone, every pause, and every retreat, made it all the more unforgettable. It wasn't just a strong argument, it was a moment of undeniable truth, laid bare for all to see, without filters, without spin, and without apology. The internet reacts quickly to moments that feel real, raw, and unfiltered, especially when those moments unfold live in front of millions. What happened during that exchange didn't just catch the attention of viewers in real time, it ignited a digital firestorm that spread across social platforms like wildfire. Within minutes, the clip began circulating, shared by people who recognized that something significant had just taken place. It wasn't just another talking point or another face-off between opposing sides. It was something different, an instance where truth cut through the noise so cleanly that even those who disagreed were forced to pay attention. People on social media latched onto the silence that followed the confrontation. It was a silence filled not with peace, but with exposure. Screenshots of stunned faces, looping video clips of the moment someone was left speechless, and quotes pulled straight from the segment became instant digital artifacts. Influencers, commentators, and everyday users weighed in with captions like, "She cleared the room," and "this is how you check hypocrisy with class." Some even turned the moment into memes, not out of mockery but to amplify its cultural resonance. Comment sections became mini battlegrounds, but this time the tone was different. There was less shouting into the void and more recognition of a shift. The tone of the conversation had changed. People who normally scroll past political content paused to watch the full clip. Users who rarely engage with serious issues were suddenly sharing, liking, and commenting, saying things like, "I don't follow politics, but this right here is powerful." The moment transcended the usual lines and reached audiences who might not have tuned in otherwise. Journalists and content creators quickly jumped in. Commentary videos popped up within hours, dissecting the way the confrontation was handled, praising the calm delivery of difficult truths, and highlighting the contrast between composure and collapse. TikTok creators edited the clip into dramatic reenactments. YouTubers filmed full reaction videos breaking down each statement, and Twitter, or X depending on the user, became a running commentary of disbelief and admiration. The virality wasn't manufactured. It wasn't engineered through a PR campaign or a viral marketing push. It was organic, driven by people who felt like they had just witnessed something unfiltered and authentic. That kind of digital momentum doesn't come from just saying something shocking. It comes from saying something that resonates. Viewers didn't just agree with the content. They felt seen by it. They recognized the power in someone refusing to back down, refusing to sugarcoat, and doing it all without raising their voice or resorting to personal attacks. Commentators across the ideological spectrum took note. Even those typically critical of her stance admitted the moment was commanding. Phrases like, "undeniably," "sharp," "a takedown with grace," and "not what I expected, but she handled that with poise," began surfacing across different channels. The recognition wasn't always accompanied by agreement, but the impact was acknowledged. And in a digital landscape where tribalism often clouds judgment, that kind of cross-spectre respect is rare. What added to the digital storm was the timing. People are hungry for authenticity, especially in an era of scripted soundbites and carefully managed public images. When someone breaks through with a message that feels rooted in conviction rather than performance, the audience responds. And they did, not just with applause but with action. Sharing, stitching, reposting, and writing essays in comment sections about how they'd waited for someone to speak like that, not with venom, but with focus, not to destroy, but to expose. Hashtags began trending. Comment threads reached thousands of responses, and in between the jokes and the hot takes, there were people saying, "This is how you handle misinformation," or "This is why representation matters." For many, it wasn't just about the clash. It was about what it symbolized. A refusal to let a skewed narrative go unchecked. A woman standing firm in the face of double standards and doing so with facts, not fury. This wasn't just a blip in the news cycle. It became part of the larger cultural conversation. People referenced the moment in podcasts, wrote opinion pieces about it, and brought it into discussions at the dinner table, in classrooms, and at work. It gave language to a feeling many had struggled to express. And in the internet age, that's the highest form of impact. When a single moment becomes a shared experience that thousands, if not millions, connect to instantly and viscerally. What unfolded during that live segment was more than just a clash of political perspectives. It was a cultural pulse point, a moment that reverberated far beyond the confines of a television studio. It reminded viewers that live discourse still matters, that when truth is delivered without fear or filter, it carries a power that no carefully curated message can replicate. Jasmine Crockett's composure, command of facts, and refusal to be derailed didn't just create a powerful moment in media, it signaled a shift in how these conversations are both conducted and received. In a time where political theater often overshadows genuine dialogue, seeing someone dismantle a hollow argument with such poise struck a nerve. It revealed a hunger in the public not for louder voices but for clearer ones. The overwhelming digital response underscored that point. People aren't simply looking to be entertained, they want to be reminded that substance can still win, in a world of spectacle. They want to see people in positions of power hold others accountable, not through mockery, but through informed resistance. The silence that followed her response wasn't just the absence of words. It was the sound of a mask falling away, and the audience heard it loud and clear. It was a silence that exposed the fragility of false confidence and showcased the strength of authenticity. That kind of silence is rare, but unforgettable. It's the kind that lingers long after the segment ends, echoing in the minds of those who witnessed it. What makes this moment even more resonant is its accessibility. Anyone with a phone, a social account, or a group chat could experience it, rewatch it, and share it. It wasn't limited to a political echo chamber. It spread across communities, platforms, and demographics. People related to the courage it took to stand in uncomfortable truth, and many saw a reflection of their own frustrations, their own voices in that fearless delivery. Ultimately, it wasn't just a win for one person, it was a win for honest discourse. It was a reminder that the truth, when spoken plainly and bravely, still has the power to cut through rehearsed narratives and force a reckoning. It proved that one person with clarity, evidence, and conviction can shift a conversation, hold the line, and leave even the loudest voices speechless. Moments like this don't fade. They ripple, and long after the cameras stop rolling, the impact continues to grow. In this case, the message was simple. Facts matter, integrity resonates, and courage, real courage, doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand tall and